What's Naruto vs. Demon Slayer Chapter 2? Let's start, guys.
Yushiro was well aware of his enemy's fighting style. He had to be considering the demon slayers were constantly hunting his master and himself, so he grabbed what he to help prepare him for the battle to come. He quickly tossed a talisman into the air. The paper fizzled for all of an instant before a blinding brightness encompassed the area. He quickly placed another talisman on himself, an experimental one meant to obscure his presence. Shinobu felt the light painfully permeate behind even her closed eyes, forcing her to bring up an arm to obscure the blinding light, focusing instead on her sense of hearing. Revealing the demon was charging her. She performed a more broad sweeping motion as opposed to her usual technique to drive him away, as a more direct thrust would higher chance of missing. And she did in fact miss, but her attack did have the intended effect of driving the demon back. Shinobu turned in place and opened her eyes as much as she could, using shadows she cast to determine the location of whatever was emitting such a light. As her movements were currently limited because of her injuries, Shinobu was forced to throw her katana, her sword successfully piercing the talisman, tearing it in half to render it useless. In the process, however, she found herself without her sword for a second time. She paid for this when she felt something crash into her chest painfully, sending her sliding back with a gasp. Her Slayer robes protected her against being pierced, but the subsequent impact extenuated her injuries, making even more difficult to breathe. A more pressing concern to Shinobu, however, was the fact she hadn't actually seen her attacker, and it wasn't due to the blinding light. Likely a demon art, Shinobu realized, but her focus was on steadying her breathing. She was without sword again and with no visual on her opponent. Yushiro silently glared at the demon slayer. He quickly realized she could hear him coming, so instead of a running charge he leapt at her, hoping to tear her heart out with bare hands, but only discovered his own physical limitations when he couldn't even tear through her clothing. Shinobu was a Hashira for a reason. She quickly composed herself, pushing past her pain to breathe deeply. She couldn't see the demon, but she could hear and see his small indents in the grass, which quickly approached her, taking long strides to avoid making as much noise as possible. With this in mind, she presented to be unaware of until he was within her reach. Using what she remembered of the boy demon's stature along with the positioning of his feet, Shinobu was able to successfully parry the demon's strike, using his own momentum against him to direct him into a nearby tree. His cloak fell away as his neck snapped against the bark, his head bending so far back it touched his upper back. Shinobu moved, continuing to use the momentum of her parry to launch herself towards her sword. She retrieved it and turned back to the demon, who appeared paralyzed from breaking his neck. Pushing past the pain once more, Shinobu took in a deep breath to ready her next technique, likely the only one she could do in her condition, the dance of the bee sting. Flutter. Naruto felt nature chakra course through him, soothing him as well as flooding him with the memories of his blood clone, who sensed his panicked chakra flared and began gather nature chakra, a preparation he would later lament not having taken earlier. All this information, however, fell into the obscuration of afterthought as he focused in on the incredibly soft and warm lips pressed to his own. He opened his eyes to find Shinobu's frantic and slitted eyes boring into his own, their beautiful violet hues encompassing the entirety of his field of view for how their faces touched. Tamayo herself was taken aback when he abruptly opened his eyes, revealing not the entrancing blue set he displayed earlier. In their place a pair of soft yellow eyes with horizontal bar-shaped irises which currently regarded her curiously. She preferred their original color, but Tamayo didn't acknowledge this fact, feeling his warm calloused hand press gently against her cheek, holding it there for a brief moment. Before gently pushing her away, he sat up, taking in her appearance and just how damaged her lips seemed to be. Naruto frowned and turned to see Shinobu preparing to kill Yushiro. He stood to his feet. "Don't kill her, Naruto-san," Tamayo whispered from where she remained seated. "Most do not become demon slayers without reason, so please try not to judge her too much. She poisoned and almost killed me," Naruto offered in return. "And she's trying to kill you and Yushiro. Will killing her make you feel better?" Tamayo asked. Naruto hated that she asked him that. Are you going to be okay? Naruto asked, looking away, his voice dropping. Didn't think I was that bad a kisser. Unseen to Naruto, Tamayo flustered ever so slightly, the memory of his lips on hers stirring something inside her long thought to be dormant. Something she didn't want to know about in that moment, instead opting to focus on his concern, which in and of itself did nothing to cool the warmth on her cheeks. She poisoned you with a wisteria and paralytic concoction. As I attempted to keep your blood flowing, some of it affected me as well. Though it was not enough to do any beyond sting, Tamayo explained. But we can discuss this later. Please save Yushiro. Naruto nodded and picked up his mask, placing it back over his face as Shinobu darted towards Yushiro. The ground beneath his feet exploded at the sheer speed he landed between the two in time to grab hold of her blade, shattering it in half in his hand. Before either demon or slayer could finish widening their eyes, Naruto moved again, applying a feather-light pressure to a point on Shinobu's neck, rendering her unconscious. He didn't attempt to catch her as she crumpled on the ground. Yushiro looked shocked, his head snapping between him and the now unconscious demon slayer. He seemed to finally decide on glaring at him. Why didn't you do that, Aya? When I heard she was the poison Hashira, I didn't expect her to literally spit poison into my face, Naruto deadpanned. Yes, well, that was quite humorous, if I do say so myself, Yushiro said casually. Yushiro. Male bonding. Tamayo-sama, Yushiro quickly added, firing off an explanation as if he always had them ready. Of course I find the fact he lives to be expected consider. We're the one helping him. Naruto rolled his eyes at the demon's obsession with his master. He reached into one of his pouches to retrieve some ninja wire and propped Shinobu against the tree, tying up with enough tension to draw blood in sections where the wire met her exposed skin. Despite his sage abilities boosting his natural healing, Naruto was still reeling from the effects of the poisoning in that his fingers and sections of his face were still numbed. Fortunately, he was able to manipulate his chakra freely once more, creating a clone with orders to rejoin the children. What was that, Naruto-san? Tamayo and Yushiro both looked incredibly surprised by the fact a replica of the blonde appeared from behind a cloud of smoke. I've got my own abilities, Naruto answered vaguely. It wasn't that he distrusted Tamayo considering she risked her life to save his, but he simply didn't deem it necessary. Did he particularly feel like explaining what a shinobi was, or his previous life in the elemental nations? Perhaps another time. I see. Tamayo realized that moment in time was not the best to press the blonde anomaly for answers, but her curiosity was more than piqued. She would be receiving an explanation from him one way or another. Yushiro himself simply glared at Naruto, recalling in that very moment just how his master had to disgrace herself to save the Cretan. What will you do with her? Tamayo asked. Gonna ask her a few questions, Naruto said as he kneeled in front of the unconscious woman. He glanced at Tamayo from over his shoulder. Since you also saved her, leave it up to you what you decide to do with her after I'm done. What are you doing now? Tamayo asked, seeing Naruto open the woman's mouth, running his finger throughout it. Unless you've got a spit guard, I need to make sure she doesn't spit poison at me again. Believe it or not, that wasn't fun and I'd rather not have it happen again. At least, soon. That'd be embarrassing, Naruto finished sarcastically. Tamayo flinched seeing Naruto callously slap the woman across the face to wake her. His attempt was successful upon his follow-up backhand. Why, you're alive. Shinobu was once more unpleasantly surprised by the mysterious man before her. Yeah, you see that demon over there? Naruto grabbed her by the chin and forced her to look at Tamayo when she refused to do so. She saved my life. You ever see a do that for a human before? I see what you're trying to do, Naruto-kun, but I hope you know that means nothing to me, Shinobu said, becoming stoic. She was well aware that after what she'd done, likely wouldn't live to see the rising sun. She only hoped Kanao and her other little butterflies would be safe. Well, maybe that doesn't mean anything to you, but it does to me, Naruto said, unaware of just how closely Tamayo was listening to what he was saying. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't give a shit if you don't believe me when I say she's a good demon. He shook his head. No. A good person. What I am interested in is this. Naruto picked up the blade end of Shinobu's broken katana and pressed it to her neck. You're gonna tell me where I can get one of these swords. I already told you how, Shinobu said with a smirk. Yano. There was a time when I wouldn't have minded monologuing with you, but you got really close to killing me, and I don't appreciate that, Naruto said, pulling the away from his neck to pierce it clean through her shoulder. Shinobu shrieked in pain. Now let's try this again, Naruto said, roughly pulling the blade out. Where can I find the swordsmiths that make the Nichiren katana? You'll never get anything out of me, Shinobu growled, glaring at him. You see, that's what they all say, Naruto said as he casually inspected the broken katana in his hand. But in the end, they all talk. So what? You're going to torture me now, violate me perhaps? Shinobu spat. Is that how you aim to prove your intentions? Considering our positions, I don't think I need to prove anything to you anymore, Naruto said, tilting his head. And don't flatter yourself. Shinobu felt a cold sense of dread wash over her, seeing his eyes begin to glow an awful red from within his mask. He trailed the tip of her own blade against her cheek. Kuhei then trailed it down her body, slowly between her breasts down to her left thigh, piercing it as well. What are you doing to her? Tamayo asked nervously and with honest concern, seeing the girl writhe in agony. Genjutsu, Naruto said, tossing the clean half-blade aside without a care to cross his arms. A technique of mine that lets me cast an illusion so powerful it's real to her. Like my own demon arts, Tamayo realized. Maybe, Naruto said with a shrug, but didn't inquire as to exactly what she was referring to. Shinobu let out another agonized screech. What is she seeing? Tamayo asked cautiously. What she needs to see. I'm trying to find out where I can get my own sword, Naruto said, his attention on Shinobu. Are there any lasting effects to these illusions? Tamayo asked. Naruto recognized concern in her voice, as opposed to intrigue, and sighed. Why do you care what happens to her? She was going to kill all three of us. As I said before, I'm certain she has her reasons. It is not my place to judge, Tamayo said. Yano, you're entirely too kind to be a demon, Naruto said, looking to her with mild exasperation. I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you, Naruto-san, for saving Yushiro and I, Tamayo said, offering him a bow. Naruto didn't enjoy the brief embarrassment he felt at the gesture. Yeah, well, considering you saved me too, I say we're even. Actually, Yushiro, Tamayo warned. Actually, I forgot what I wanted to say, Tamayo-sama, Yushiro muttered. Naruto looked off into the distance, seeing the sun was on the cusp of rising. He didn't think he needed to remind the two demons of this, but he chose to do so to prog things. As far as Shinobu was concerned, Tamayo's information checked out in that regard. She continued to refuse him the information he wanted, indicating she herself likely did know where they were made, and continuing to interrogate her was unnecessary. Sun's starting to rise, Naruto commented after having rendered Shinobu unconscious again. He unsealed paper and ink, setting the blank seal on her forehead. What are you doing now? Yushiro asked, his tone indicating he was truly curious as opposed to his usual snark. Sealing arts, Naruto said as he worked on the seal, well aware the demon was standing over his shoulder, observing. I'm no seal master, but I do know enough to get M. I'm placing a binding seal to keep her from moving. Unlike her poison, it won't stop her from breathing, just from moving. Very interesting. Tamayo voiced what her apprentice would not. It's got its uses, Naruto said as he placed the finishing touches on the seal and activated it. He cut Shinobu's restraints and picked her up by the hem of her robes, turning. The two demons. I'll leave her in your care then, Naruto said as he handed her over to a disturbed Yushiro. Heal her or get rid of her, I don't care. What will you do? Tamayo asked, getting the feeling he was leaving, and it unsettled her strictly due to her curiosity. Or so she told herself, because there was much to inquire about the mysterious young man of so many talents. Gonna go check on the orphans to make sure they're okay, Naruto said, turning to Yushiro. Actually, you mind coming with me? I want you to make sure they're all doing. Physically. Absolutely not. Yushiro denied immediately. Yushiro. It was all Tamayo had to say. I suppose I can spare a few moments, Yushiro said, handing Shinobu off to his master. Thank you, Naruto said, regarding Tamayo more so. I'll meet you back at the room later tonight. Naruto returned back to where the children were and sent his clone out to patrol the area while he sat and watched as Yushiro inspected the still slumbering children. Suffering from whatever sleeping technique the demon Shiho placed them under, along with slight malnourishment for some, they were all healthy enough. With that concern settled, Yushiro returned to his master while Naruto remained in place, leaned up against a wall. He managed to get a couple of hours asleep. Their street also woke him up and he observed as Myra's frantic eyes searched the room, completing what appeared to be a quick mental headcount. Relief and tears filled her eyes as she finally saw him. To Naruto's shock and surprise, the girl ran to him, pushing his hand aside to hug him. You did it. You really did it. Naruto tried a few times to gently push the girl away but she didn't relent, sobbing into his chest. He sighed in resignation, allowing her to cry, to grieve for those she'd lost. Before he arrived, one by one, the other children also began to stir, also coming to the same realization Mia had. Before Naruto could stop them, he found himself swarmed in a completely involuntary group hug. He had to substitute himself with a nearby pillow, to the awe and adoration of the children. Their constant praises made him feel uncomfortable, bringing up memories he'd rather leave buried in the past of the children of his own world in the waning days of the war. How do you know I actually fought a demon? Naruto asked after their excitement subsided. Your mask, Mia supplied. It's got scratches and some blood on the bottom. Are you sure you're okay? Naruto removed his mask, finding it had been scratched. He felt around his face and found the healing scratches on his chin, but Shiho hadn't actually landed a strike on H, neither had Shinobu outside of poisoning him. He quickly deduced that it must have been Tamayo when she removed his mask to help him. There was still blood on his mask, so he sealed it away for later repairs. Yeah, I told ya he could do it. Shin cheered, raising a small fist. I thought you said he was gonna get eaten. A younger boy asked curiously. Don't know what you're talking about. Shin released a series of exaggerated and very nervous laughs, which prompted the others to laugh both with and at him. Thank you so much for helping us, Naruto ni. Riko added happily, perhaps in an attempt to help her sweating brother, but nevertheless genuine. Naruto felt a warmth invade his chest as they continued to sing him their praises. As much as he wanted to keep them at an arm's length, their joy was very much infectious, though he'd returned for a reason. Tell me about the village leader, Naruto said to Mia specifically. His name is Izuki Kanto, Mia uttered, confused. Why do you ask? Don't worry about that, Naruto said as he stood. I'll make sure you're all taken care of from now on, but I have to go now. That earned him a wave of disappointed and saddened whines from the children, Riko at the forefront. Can't you stay with us? Rika asked with teary eyes, rushing to hug his feet. Rika. Mia attempted to pull the girl back with emotion wetting her own eyes. Please let Naruto-san go. But I don't want you to go, Rika said following a hiccup. Tell you what, Naruto kneeled down to her level. I'll visit you all as often as I can just to make sure you're all doing well. Promise. Rika held out her pinky finger. Naruto allowed himself to smile, accepting the gesture. I promise. Shinobu woke up, feeling dread flood her when she realized she couldn't move her body, only her eyes. Somehow she was still able to breathe, and despite everything she remembered happening to her, she was not in any pain. She found she was in a rather small room with beige walls and another bed opposite the one she was currently in. It smelled like antiseptic and medicinal alcohol, this, aloe. The common sounds of street traffic which filtered in from outside, all indicated she was in fact alive. I see you're awake. She glared at the demon with as much expression as her eyes could broadcast. What have you done to me? Shinobu asked, finding she could also speak. Well, it's not so much what I did, as much as what Naruto-san did, Tamayo said following a contemplative hum. You mean torturing me? Shinobu spat. I assume you taught him that. When he tortured you, what did he do to you, exactly? Tamayo asked with a frown. Shinobu glared even harder at the demon. You ask as if you weren't watching when he cut my face and drove my own blade through me. I see. The demon feigned a troubled expression. Can you look down and tell me what you see? She followed the demon with her eyes as she pulled the sheets that covered her body to reveal she was bandaged around her midsection alone, pristine white bandages obscured her breasts but not her belly. Aside from the wrappings on her chest, all she wore beneath was her modest undergarments, exposing her legs. How did you? Shinobu trailed, realizing that aside from a few scratches and bruises, she was uninjured. She looked back to Tamayo with an accusatory look. How were able to heal me so quickly? All I've given you is a stimulant of my own creation meant to speed your own natural healing, as you've a few broken ribs, so it wouldn't be accurate to say I've fully healed. Tamayo said as she covered her again. But he stabbed me. Shinobu finally lost what little of her composure remained to shout. I felt every moment as he cut and pierced my skin. And his eyes, they were red. Slitted. Like a demon. He must be one, right? With the demon arts he's displayed. Shinobu absolutely abhorred the look of sympathy the demon was mocking her with. His eyes are a brilliant shade of blue. Not. Tamayo seemed to reconsider what she was going to say. He's human, else he wouldn't have survived your wisteria poison. Would he? He might if he was powerful enough, and he does seem powerful, Shinobu retorted, composing herself once more. That he is, Tamayo acknowledged with a small smile. Just how powerful, even I do not know, I admit. I can't say to speak to what he did to you, or exactly how he did it. What I do know is that it was merely an illusion. An illusion. Shinobu looked down to her covered body again, realizing with every breath she could feel a dull pain spike in her chest, likely the broken ribs, but there was nothing from where she was stabbed. Or at least, where she thought to have been stabbed. So he didn't. I know it must be difficult for you to believe in our intentions, especially after this encounter, but please understand that we mean you and your organization no harm. At end of the day, we are after the same thing, Tamayo said. Yes, and what may that be? Shinobu questioned defiantly. It was an exaggerated emotion considering she found herself questioning her own resolve now. There had been ample opportunities for the demons and their powerful human ally to kill her, and yet, they hadn't. Instead taking steps in helping heal her. But her pride as a Hashira for the demon slayers would not allow her to be swayed so easily. At the end of the day, they were her enemies. We aim to stop Kibutsuji Muzan, Tamayo said. Shinobu stared at the demon with both surprise and cautious anticipation, waiting for her to begin to destroy herself, as what was supposed to happen to those demons spoke his name. A few heavy, silence-filled moments passed before she realized the demand remained unharmed, returning her stare. I imagine you expected me to die just then. Tamayo accurately surmised. You said his name, Shinobu muttered. How are you still alive? If you'll allow me to explain myself once more, really explain myself, I'll tell you, Tamayo said, her expression becoming troubled. I do not mean to speak for Naruto-san, you'll hear me out. I'll tell you all I know of Muzan, and what I intend to do to stop him. I suppose I don't have much a choice, do I? Shinobu said, looking away as best she could without being able to move her head. I do apologize about that, but you must understand why you must remain the way you are for the time being, Tamayo said, offering her an apologetic bow. Suddenly, she appeared surprisingly flustered. And if I'm being truthful, I do not know how to free you, as it was Naruto-san who's placed what he refers to as a binding seal on you. Belm, I would remove it if I knew how to, but to attempt it without understanding how it works may prove dangerous to your health. Shinobu would have shivered if she could. Before you begin spouting your propaganda, I would like to know one thing. If I can answer it, I will, Tamayo said, smiling at her perceived progress. Naruto. Shinobu looked to the demon again. Who is he, exactly? What are his motives for working with demons of all things? I'm afraid I don't have those answers, Tamayo said, smiling again. And even if I did, it would be unkind of me to tell you. So I suppose that is something you'd have to, yourself. Where is he, anyways? Shinobu asked, glancing about the room again to find it was still only the female demon and herself. Visiting this village's orphans, Tamayo's smile became soft and her eyes half-lidded, as if lost in thought. Yushiro went with him earlier to conduct a check on them. Evid found them all living in the rundown home of their previous caretaker. Though it appears he gave them all of our money. A kind gesture, for certain, but an unfortunate. Considering that really was all our funds. But I suppose that's on me for not clarifying. Orphans. Shinobu repeated in confusion. What orphans? The same that have been disappearing as of late, Tamayo revealed. Yushiro and I came here to look into the matter and that's when we met Naruto-san. He fought an Itachi demon which terrorized them tonight, though I do wonder how he did that without a sword. I let him use mine, Shinobu muttered without considering what she was saying until she said it. She'd come to investigate sightings of Tamayo herself and was unaware other demons until encountering Naruto fighting one. Did you now? Tamayo looked surprised. But she wasn't really listening. Shinobu thought back to what the demon was saying as she died, along with Naruto's promise to protect her children. It wasn't something any consideration into until now. While Naruto-san may seem a little rough around the edges, Tamayo began, she herself seemingly lost in her own thoughts. I do believe he's a good man at heart. Shinobu considered what the demon said, wondering if it really was true. Naruto held the fat man up by his robes, the fabric straining and tearing every time he kicked his stubby feet. He'd cast a minor genjutsu on the man much like he did on Shinobu, only this one was simply ascetic in nature. What are you? The man squirmed. He-Man was on the verge of tears as the man in the fox mask glowered at him with glowing red eyes and a horrifying voice that with it the promise of pain and suffering. The killing intent and the few strikes across his face were very much real. He'd come in, non-lethally dispatching the guards before rushing the fat man to make his demon. He turned to the young woman who had been under the village leader's desk. She was frozen in fear, holding herself in a ball beneath the desk. You should go. The woman needed no further encouragement to run away. Naruto returned his attention back to the sniveling man and held up the picture he had on his desk, studying it for a moment before turning it to show the man. You have lovely family, Izuki. A newborn baby boy and a little girl who just started school. And your wife. I imagine yours wasn't the classic story of boy meets girl. It would be a shame if anything were to happen to them. What do you want from me? The man was openly crying now. I'll give you anything you want but please don't hurt me or my family. I'm glad you asked. Naruto grinned. The man began to cry even harder, seeing a horrifying row of razor-sharp teeth break the mask, twisting the monster's face. Naruto returned to their room to find all was quiet. Tamayo was at a desk, writing in a journal of sorts while Yushiro sat crossed on the floor near her, writing on a small paper that reminded him of a seal, if a bit more ornamental in construct. Finally, on one of the two beds, Shinobu was sleeping, his binding seal still set on her forehead. Tamayo greeted him first, stopping her writing to smile at him, pressing a finger to her lips, she glanced to the slumbering demon slayer. Naruto followed her eyes, looking between the two a few times before allowing the supplies he had slung over his shoulder to fall roughly and quite loudly onto the floor, earning him a look of disapproval. Demonic woman. Shinobu's eyes snapped open, frantically roaming the room before settling on him, before her expression became a glare aimed at him to the best of her ability. You're still alive? Naruto asked in a deadpan. He approached her, kneeling down to inspect her. But how's that possible? He glanced at the two demons from over his shish. Why haven't you two evil demons eaten her yet? Naruto-san. Tamayo was reluctant to chastise him for reasons she didn't give any credence to, but she was certainly disappointed in his mocking of the poor girl. I don't eat trash, Yushiro dismissed simply, never once looking up from what he was working on. Ooh, that was mean. Naruto removed his mask and set it to the side of his face to reveal a smirk. You hear that? Doesn't seem like you're all that appetizing after all. Go die. Shinobu continued to glare at him, impressively conveying her distaste of him despite her limited movement. Well, that's just rude, Naruto said with a shake of his head. He stood, deciding he'd sufficiently irked the woman. He regarded Tamayo. Seriously though, what do you want with her? We'll be freeing her. Of course, Tamayo said with her own frown in place. In fact, I would have done so had I known how. Maybe it's a good thing I didn't show you then, Naruto said as he turned back to Shinobu. What'll you do if I free you right now? Why, kill you all, of course. Shinobu said, momentarily reverting back to her cheery disposition. Yeah, that's what I figured. Naruto looked to Yushiro next. And what about you? What do you think we should do with her? I could use a test subject for a new talisman I'm working on, Yushiro supplied, continuing his work undeterred by the happenings around him. Yushiro. But of course I'll do anything Tamayo-sama wishes, Yushiro finished without breaking his cadence. Naruto hummed. You hear that? Sounds like Tamayo's saved your life. He held up his index and middle finger, counting them. I think that makes twice already. What are you saying? Shinobu sounded both cautious and confused. After you poisoned me, I was gonna put a Rasengan through your heart, but Tamayo specifically asked me not to kill you, Naruto said, opening the palm of his hand to Ko. The technique, bathing the room in a blue hue. I know it looks really cool, but trust me when I say this isn't something you want touching you. Ya see, you almost killed M. I don't appreciate that, so just know that if it were up to me, I'd get rid of you before you could try again, but I'm gonna respect her wishes. So, Yano, looks like a dem. Saved your life a second time, healed you too. Who would have thought? Naruto-san, this really isn't necessary, Tamayo insisted. I think it is. Naruto moved quickly, bringing his Rasengan within inches of Shinobu's face. He was aware of the fact Tamayo had abruptly stood up behind him, knocking H. chair out from beneath her. His peripherals revealed her claws were pressed harshly against her own wrist to the point of drawing her own blood. Yushiro was on his feet as well, looking between his master and the two humans, conflicted. It was obvious she aimed to save the demon slayer, whereas Naruto looked end her life. He wouldn't exactly mind it if he did so, but ultimately he would always side with his master, no matter how against her intentions he could be at times. Do not hurt her, Naruto-san, Tamayo warned. Naruto recognized her words were not a request. He looked down at the beautiful woman beneath him, her equally beautiful eyes surprisingly fearlessly fierce in their regahim. I think that technically makes 3, he said, canceling his Rasengan to hold up 3 fingers, poking her larger than average forehead with them. She almost reminded him of Sakura in that moment. Their glares were almost identical. What is the meaning of this, Naruto-san? Tamayo asked uncomfortably once it became clear he would not be hurting the demon slayer. She didn't appreciate his sudden penchant for violence or just how ready he seemed to take another life. Though she couldn't exactly blame him considering the demon slayer had just attempted to take all, she's defenseless. Just trying to show her who the real monster is here, Naruto said with a shrug. So I'll ask again, will you try killing us if I let you go? Shinobu was conflicted. She couldn't be sure whether or not Naruto and the demon had previously conspired to put on a display in an attempt to sway her beliefs. Althaug. Something. Her instincts possibly informed her this wasn't likely to be the case. But to believe a demon of all things had been responsible for saving her life from a human something she couldn't exactly accept so easily. Demons, all demons, killed and devoured selfishly. She'd witnessed this personally when they took her sister from her and when they orphaned each and every one of her butterflies. There was no such a thing as a good demon. Her training and experiences instilled this into her from a young age. Even so, it was really quite difficult to ignore the very true fact the demon Tamayo had saved her from Naruto's wrath. Also, the way in which she spoke out against Muzan planted yet another seed of doubt in her mind as much of the intelligence she offered on the head demon matched their own information. Knowledge many a slayer had given their lives to obtain. Had their sacrifices been in vain then? Of course not, but a nagging voice in the back of her head wondered if things would have been different had they known of Tamayo. Her information would have saved many lives. Depending on what else she had today, it could save many more yet. The thought certainly gave her pause. Even if I do not personally kill you, that doesn't mean there won't be others who won't try in my stead, Shinobu muttered, looking away. In doing so, she missed the look genuine surprise Naruto displayed. He didn't exactly believe he would be able to get through to her. Is there nothing you can do to stop that? Naruto asked, pushing forward. Doesn't it make more sense to work with us than against us? Just imagine what can be a calm. If Shinobu is able to find a way to turn demons into humans again, the lives we'd be able to save. The ultimate goal of the Demon Slayer Corps is not to turn demons back into humans, but rather to kill Muzan so that no more are created, Shinobu said, still reluctantly. Defiant. Why can't we do both? Naruto asked with frustration leaking into his words. Don't you think it's at least worth it to try? What I personally think is neither here nor there because again, it is not up to me, Shinobu said. Well then who the hell is it up to? Naruto asked, clenching his fists at his side, entirely unsure as to why he cared so much. The current world wasn't his own, but, again, there was no guaranteeing his return to his own, so the threat of demons was one he wouldn't be able to avoid nor would he ignore. I cannot and will not tell you that, Shinobu said, her words coming out contrastingly soft. Even if you do torture me again. Her words made Naruto flinch, feeling a conflicting sense of annoyance and guilt. He felt justified in his actions considering she did try to kill them, and yet, that didn't less. Pit in his stomach. Fine, Naruto sighed as he ran a hand through his hair, reminding him he needed a shower. I'll just have to figure this out on my own, kick Muzan's ass into the sun or something. It won't be that easy, Naruto-san, Tamayo warned reluctantly. She wondered why Naruto seemed so worn, sounding almost defeated in that moment in a way that seemed go beyond the Demon Slayer's resolve. Yeah, I guess it never really is, Naruto said, approaching Shinobu again. Alright then, I'm gonna let you go now. Just, if you're gonna try and kill me again, can you do it after I've had something to eat? If I'm gonna die, I'd rather go with a stomach full of ramen. Man, am I glad they actually have it here. Both master and student approached with great interest to see just how a technique could be undone, both silently wondering and hoping Naruto would pass along the knowledge. Tamayo herself was personally curious to see all that he could do and what he was capable of, along with discovering exactly what made him different from the humans she'd tasted. She did have a theory. Naruto noticed his audience, his expression growing completely serious. Watch closely you two because this is something that requires the utmost care and expertise. Shinobu herself began to worry at his tone and wondered briefly if it would hurt. Naruto kneeled to her level, clenching his hands a few times, his joints popping as he did so, and took a few breaths to steady them. For a brief moment, all three of his observers held their breath. That was until, much like pulling a bandage, he yanked the seal off with little care, casually crumbing it up into a ball which he tossed over his shoulder. All three stared at him with varying faces of confusion as he stood, yawning, and continued following him as he walked over to the pack he brought with him, puling out AC. Instant ramen. Been too long, Naruto said with a relieved sigh. It had been a long time since he enjoyed a nice bowl of ramen. Instant was never as good as freshly made, especially ram. Crafted from the Ichirakus, but beggars could never choose. Do we have a way to heat any water around here? Naruto-san. Tamayo's expression was stern. You filthy cretin. Yoshiro spat. You piece of. Whoa. Naruto expected some reaction from his little jest, but not to that extreme considering the three now glaring at him were some of the most stoic people he'd ever since Sasuke. Shinobu and Tamayo both did a rather good job of wearing their masks, but he could see hints of what they both hid beneath. Yoshiro, on the other hand, did nothing to hide disdain for anyone and everyone who wasn't his master, and on some level, Naruto respected that. All they had to do was pull the paper off. Shinobu was the first to express her issue with him. Well, it's not really just any piece of paper, but their expressions remained the same. But I guess that's not the issue. Yeah, it's all you had to do. Don't you think that maybe that was something you should have mentioned to us? Tamayo demanded. Probably. Naruto relented, feeling oddly off-put by just how further her lavender eyes narrowed. Upon closer observation, he noticed just how alike Shinobu and Tamayo actually were in appearance. Their eyes were very similar in color, with Shinobu's eyes being a sha darker, while their faces, while shaped differently, also held some resemblances. If he didn't know any better, he may have confused them for siblings. Two incredibly beautiful and very angry siblings. Probably. Tamayo repeated. Well, you didn't ask, Naruto supplied with a shrug. He regarded Shinobu directly. And you're free now, so, Yano, scram, get outta here, shoo, he finished, waving her. As he continued his search for a way to boil water, Shinobu's eyes began to twitch. Did you just shoo me? You, Yano, you were oddly nicer to me when you were trying to kill me, Naruto observed, doing a double take, his eyes trailing down, realizing now her lack of dress with an blanket to cover her. Taken aback by the reaction, Shinobu followed his gaze, her cheeks turning red when she realized her modesty was barely covered by bandages in her undergarments. Get out, she growled. You seem to forget this is our room, Naruto said, crossing his arms. Why should Naruto-san? Tamayo inserted herself into the conversation, moving to stand in front of Shinobu. You must always respect a woman's modesty. Naruto sighed as he, along with Yushiro, were promptly evicted. A few minutes later and Naruto was loudly slurping on his noodles as Shinobu stared at him, her eye twitching with every other particularly loud slurp. Despite enjoying he was still very much aware of the Demon Slayer's every movement, never once allowing her out of his line of sight. Well, will you come with me or not? She asked him impatiently. Naruto looked to Tamayo, who appeared troubled as she too awaited his response. He turned his head in her direction. Yano, they'll probably just try to kill me if I go wher. Strength in numbers and all that. That is a possibility I have considered. Tamayo was reluctant to continue her line of reasoning. But I do believe this is the best way to broker an understanding between and the Demon Slayer organization. I imagine they'll be more inclined to hear you out than I. Will they? Naruto asked Shinobu. I cannot guarantee anything, but if a Nichiren katana is what you're after, I could sponsor you to become a Slayer at the next year's final selection, Shinobu said. Naruto finished the last of his noodles, washing them down with a glass of water. Sure enough, they nowhere near as good as what Tsuki and Ayame were capable of, but certainly beat rations and the abomination Sakura subjected him to during the war. Well, Shinobu pressed. Why the sudden change of heart? Naruto asked without any reservation. Earlier you were pretty dead set on killing me and Tamayo, so you can imagine it's hard for me. Believe you're doing this with no underlying motives. While I wouldn't shed a tear if you were suddenly struck down by a stray lightning strike, I would be remiss to admit the Demon Slayer Corps would benefit greatly from skillset, Shinobu said after a pause. Naruto hummed and regarded Tamayo again. Yano, if I do this, I'll probably be gone for a while. Tamayo steadied her expression, nodding. I understand that, but you see, Yushiro and I have been looking for a place to settle for some time. If you were to seek out directly under Muzen's command for their blood, we wouldn't have been able to come with you either way. Yushiro and I aren't all that powerful compared to even some of lower moons. I'm afraid we'd only be a hindrance to you. Yushiro didn't seem particularly happy to hear that, but the way in which his head dropped indicated he agreed. Besides, I believe you owe me for breaking my katana, Shinobu added. Naruto ignored the comment as he considered what was proposed. He wasn't in a hurry to join an organization who, despite having a surface-level noble goal, he knew nothing about. In fact, his only information came from their natural enemies, 2 demons, and a member there who just tried to kill him. But he also couldn't ignore the benefits of being backed by an established organization in a world unfamiliar to him. Not to take away from Tamayo, but a demon living in literal shadows could only help him so much. If he were to find a way home, the Demon Slayers may be his better hope. Naruto didn't particularly appreciate this. Fine. Naruto finally agreed. I'll do it, But since I don't trust you any further than I can throw you. He paused to closely study Shinobu again, noting she was rather pet. That he could likely throw her rather far. Please refrain from looking at me with your leering eyes, Shinobu muttered. Fuck, I'm getting old, Naruto grumbled, regarding the use of that phrase. Jiraiya had said it on a couple of occasions. Anyways, if I agree to this, I just want you to know. Thing. If you betray me, if when we arrive they try to kill me, or they send people to kill Tamayo and Yushiro, I won't hold back. I will kill you all. Despite maintaining her outward composure, Shinobu almost shuddered at the promise his words conveyed and just how calmly he spoke. Whether or not he was capable carrying out his threat, he certainly seemed to believe it, and that was more than enough to put her on edge. Were you holding back? But Shinobu knew the answer to that. She'd gotten lucky in poisoning him. The way in which he easily invaded her space to disarm her proved as much. In a way, it was of his own reluctance to take her life, along with the demon Tamayo's intervention, that she continued to live. Do we have an understanding? Naruto asked, ignoring her question. Shinobu only nodded. With that decided, they planned on spending another night in the village before departing the next morning to avoid demonic encounters, considering Naruto had shattered Shinobu's sword, a fact she still seemed rather sore about. Beyond that, both humans had strength to recover, Shinobu from her fight, Naruto from coming from a world at having slept a combined 4 hours in the past week before even arriving to the current. Upon waking the next morning, Naruto discovered Shinobu had gone out early to retrieve some supplies, leaving him alone with the two demons. He decided to settle some concerns. I doubt she actually changed her mind, Naruto said, speaking to Tamayo. People can change, Naruto-san, Tamayo offered, but the explanation seemed weak to even herself. She's probably sending word to her people now. I wouldn't be surprised if they came looking for you too, Naruto said. He wouldn't play into her delusions. I'll leave a clue with you, but you really should get going as soon as night falls. I greatly appreciate your concern, Naruto-san, Tamayo said with a small smile and a bow. But on the subject of your abilities, I am curious as to how you're capable of feats. We probably don't have a lot of time before she returns, so I'll let my clone explain everything once we're gone. Just know they're alive and they're extensions of myself. B will eventually dispel once it runs out of chakra, Naruto said as he bit his thumb, conjuring his strongest clone. Make sure you've left this village well before that happens. Without saying a word, his clone disappeared into the restroom. Did they have to use the restroom as well? Yushiro asked with disgust. Yano. I don't actually know, Naruto admitted. But that's not what he's doing. Again, once we're gone, feel free to ask whatever questions you have. Just know she ca no ease with you. Thank you again for your consideration, Naruto-san, Tamayo said, pressing a delicate hand to her own cheek with another smile. Naruto cleared his throat without needing to, wondering why this woman of all people made him feel uncomfortable with a smile alone. It's nothing. Tamayo, in return, offered him a scroll with the potential locations for safe houses she and Yushiro intended on scouting out, offering rough estimates of how long they plan be in any one place so that he may find them. The gesture alone spoke to how much the woman seemed to trust him, considering the information, in the wrong hands, to her and her apprentice's deaths. Little else was exchanged between them upon Shinobu's return. She had the remnants of her blade wrapped in white bandagings, slung over her shoulder. Aside from a SM pack hanging on her pack, she remained in her tattered demon slayer robes. With little fanfare but the promise of meeting again, the humans and demons parted ways. They had been traveling for a few hours at a sedate pace when a crow began to circle them overhead before finally landing on Shinobu's shoulders. Low-level demon slayers requesting backup from a Hashira for a high-level demon threat. The bird screeched in an oddly human voice. Of course it's a talking crow, Naruto said, uncomfortable as memories of Itachi flashed through his mind. Shinobu didn't care to question exactly what he was referring to as her crow landed on her shoulder to deliver the rest to its message. Hashira Mitsuri currently en route, further assistance required until further notice. Head west to the village near the sea. The crow squared out before bursting into the SK. Naruto watched it fly away, disappearing behind a curtain of trees. What was that? He asked. It's a messenger crow. We all get one upon making it through the final selection. You'll have your own if you make it. It's how we receive our orders, Shinobu informed. It was also likely how they sent messages to one another. Naruto suspected this and was now more than ever confined. She likely made the demon slayers aware of their situation. For the moment, he wouldn't allow himself to worry about it too much, considering he had a contingency in place should his suspicions be proven correct. We gonna answer the call? Naruto asked rhetorically. There is no such a thing as denying an order, Shinobu said, turning on her heel to move in a new direction. Naruto followed her, weighing out his options in his mind. According to the crow, there would be another Hashira meeting them along with potentially other demon slayers. Knew better than to assume all the Hashira were on the same level of Shinobu, who herself almost managed to kill him. Even now, he kept his distance from the poison Hashira, making sure he was, at all times, upwind of her. He did nothing to hide this, and it was more than obvious Shinobu well aware. That's how they traveled, in complete silence, lost in their own thoughts while never once dropping their guard around one another. It was evening by the time they arrived at a small fishing village that reminded Naruto of Wave when they first arrived on his first real mission. Closed shops lined the main, while homes with beautiful bones lay in general states of disrepair in the distance, indicating the village may have at one point been prosperous. The few villagers they crow regarded them wearily, they themselves appearing just as worn and despondent as their surroundings. We must find this village's lodgings. I imagine that's where we'll find the demon slayers currently dispatched here, assuming they're still alive, Shinobu announced. Naruto nodded and followed Shinobu to a large inn that, itself, appeared to have seen better days. Within they found a small bar that sat weary fishermen who upon enter became silent to stare at them with the same suspicion everyone else had shown them thus far. What can I get you to? A young woman asked them upon taking a seat. She almost reminded Naruto of a Yame in her unassuming beauty. She had shoulder-length brown hair tied back into a pony's tail, with similar colored eyes and a slim figure. 2 waters and some information, Shinobu said as she set a few coins down on the table. The young woman seemed weary at this response. Who are you people? She asked, taking the money regardless of the accusation in her tone. We don't need any more false hope around here. Or liars for that matter. I imagine someone else has already asked you this. Naruto said. Yes, a cocky kid in here asking about our recent disappearances. He claimed he came to save us from the monster at sea. Naruto and Shinobu shared a look between them. This young man, did he offer a name? Shinobu asked, knowing he likely hadn't. No, but he was dressed like you, the young woman said, indicating to Shinobu, her eyes briefly glancing her wrapped sword. And he carried a blade as well. I haven't say. Since yesterday. Probably ran off with our money, too. He accepted payment. Shinobu asked. Naruto noticed the slight creasing of her eyes on her otherwise pleasant mask and wondered exactly how demon slayers were compensated. Yes, the girl said, affronted. Just then a big gruff man took his stand, his chair scraping noisily along the wooden floor in an otherwise silent room. The atmosphere went from sullen to on edge imid. Naruto leaned back in his seat, ready to take action should he need to, and he noticed Shinobu turn her head ever so slightly. The man was large and appeared well fed, juxtaposed to the other patrons, with scars both fresh and old. Naruto didn't detect any real threat from the man other than could pose to the untrained. His stride was aggressive, but he seemed to lack any real signs of discipline, his arms large and crossed as he reached them, glaring down at N. Specifically. These two bothering you, Shana-chan? The man asked. The woman, Shana, seemed annoyed by the man, taking a step to the side from him. No, Shiro, they were just ordering before going on their way. Shana said, her words more of a demand than a suggestion. You look like that idiot from the day before, Shinji said, staring Shinobu up and down with a leering intent. Though I admit, you're easier on the eyes. Oh my, thank you for the compliment, Shinobu said with a false, closed-eye smile. Naruto rolled his eyes and he noticed this. You got something you wanna say, pretty boy. Shiro sneered. Oh my, thank you for the compliment. Naruto's grin was sarcastic and his comment earned a few restrained chuckles from those around. You want to take this outside, you little shit? Shiro challenged, as he forced his chest to become more pronounced. Shayna rolled her own eyes at the situation, but otherwise appeared impartial to the happenings. It was almost as if wasn't the first time such a scene played out. No thanks. I prefer more lovelier company, Naruto said, winking at the woman. Pink dusted Shayna's cheeks as she tried to fight a smirk. This seemed to set Shiro off even further. I won't allow some punk grifter to take anyone money from us, he declared loudly, bringing in those around. So you're going to return the money Shayna-chan paid, or I gonna kick your ass and take your bitch as mine. You hear that? Naruto said, raising both his eyebrows in mild amusement towards the demon slayer. Should I defend your honor, dear? Shinobu's pleasant expression briefly fell away. The fact you have to ask that, Shiro once more boldly proclaimed to his audience, who jeered and lanced their own insults. What's a beautiful woman like you doing with spineless punk like this? I can show you how a real man behaves. Oh my, I suppose you're right, Shinobu said, turning to smile sweetly up at the man. Why don't you show me how a real man fights? My pleasure. Shiro grinned viciously at Naruto. But I think it's best you stay in here with Shayna-chan. You might not want to see what I do to him. My hero, Shinobu said, smiling at Naruto this time around. You hear that, honey? Will you be able to defend my honor, I wonder? Her words were sickly sweet. Guess I've got no choice now. Let's go then, Naruto said following a sigh. He stood and followed after Shiro. Do not kill him, Shinobu warned in a whisper as Naruto walked past her. A casual shrug of his shoulders indicated he'd heard, but not necessarily that he agreed. Shayna now looked concerned and looked down at Shinobu with slight disgust. Shinji may be a meathead, but he really does know how to fight and is known to be violent. May very well kill your husband, if not severely injure him. Oh, he isn't my husband, Shinobu said, unconcerned. Boyfriend, friend, whatever. You should stop them before he gets hurt, Shayna warned. I'm sure he'll be fine, Shinobu dismissed with another smile. Now I believe you've yet to fill my order. Shayna threw a final look of concern in the direction the men retreated, noting Shiro's crew following close behind, already drawing their blades. She was truly concerned for blonde man's safety, but there was nothing she could do. When she returned with the drinks a few moments later, Shayna was surprised to see Naruto re-enter, looking as if nothing happened with the exception of the blood-stained knuckles. She was stunned into a momentary state of inaction as he grabbed his drink, still on her tray, before taking his seat again. He downed all his water in one long pee. Before she reacted. Did you talk your way out of it? She asked, flabbergasted. Shayna had never known Shiro to be one for words, much less reasoning. The blood on his hands was another indication of otherwise, but she simply couldn't believe he'd bested the village's most vicious fighter. Probably should have tried that, but no, not this time, Naruto said as he indicated to the towel hanging around her waist. Mind if I borrow that? Wordlessly, she offered him the towel. Thanks. The information, Shinobu pressed the poor girl. On some level she sympathized with her, considering she herself was only very recently taken aback by the blonde's capab. There's something in the waters that have been taking our fishermen, Shayna began, half in a daze before becoming refocused. Who are you two? She asked again. What's important is that we're here to help, Shinobu said pleasantly. And rest assured we won't be charging you. Truth be told, you shouldn't have been charged to Beggy. So I do apologize for that. But if you wouldn't mind, we'll need to know everything about what we'll be facing. But before you start, do you serve ramen here? Naruto asked, feeling hungry again. No, Shayna said after a brief pause. Ah, well, Naruto palmed his knees and leaned back in his seat with a silent sigh. In a near parallel to Wave, the small fishing village of Mizusu, a once prosperous port that saw a sharp decline in travel once ships began to sink under mysterious circums. However, in place of a money-hungry tyrant, rumors of a monster lurking in the waters, along with the disappearances of entire shipping companies, deterred travel and business. That was the rumor, at any rate. Not many lived to tell the tale of what they encountered out at sea, and the few that had were labeled either superstitious, or simply crazy. They claimed they encountered a beast of legend, with tentacles nearly a mile long. Shayna's own father had recently been lost at sea, prompting her to reach out for help to whoever would listen. Though not many did, and the few who did answer the call never made it back to report, or they'd simply taken her offerings and disappeared without even making the attempt. I fear I may soon have to close the inn if this continues, Shayna finished sadly. We'll do what we can, Naruto said, with Shinobu nodding along. We'll need a room to wait for nightfall. Of course, but wouldn't it be safer to go out during the day when you can search for the monster? Shayna asked. These attacks, I'm to assume most took place during the night. Shinobu asked. Yes, how did you know? Shayna asked. It was a mere supposition, Shinobu said, standing. We've preparations to do. We'll be back by a little later before nightfall. Thank you, Shayna said, though she didn't exactly sound grateful. Naruto suspected she'd had the current conversation more than once. As they began to leave, Shayna followed after them. Do you need one room or two? Outside the inn, on the street was Shiro and his 4 cronies, all stacked on atop another beneath a nearby tree, looking various stages of bruised. That in itself was a sigh. Behold, but what added to the oddity of the scene was the voluptuous woman crouched beside them, giggling as she poked them with a stick. Drawing pained groans from men. She had bright pink hair with green tips, ending in 2 large tails. Her black demon slayer's outfit, below a white shawl, ended in a short skirt, with a wide opening in the revealing a fair amount of hers, and green knee-high socks. Naruto couldn't help but stare until he felt Shinobu's glare on him. What? I didn't kill them, and I was even nice enough to put them in the shade. I don't know who she is though. She wasn't here earlier, Naruto said. Heya, Shinobu-chan. The woman waved at her with a bright smile and a twinkle in her soft green eyes. That would be Mitsuri, the love Hashira, Shinobu said with a sigh and looked to a still shocked Shayna. Make that 3 rooms, please. Love Hashira, Naruto muttered as he considered what exactly that meant. Shinobu being named the poison Hashira was self-explanatory, leaving him wondering exactly. The admittedly beautiful woman specialized in. Whatever the case, Naruto couldn't help but think Jiraiya would have loved to have seen the world he currently found himself, if Tamayo, Shinobu, and now Mitsuri were an indicator of the women that inhabited it. Mitsuri, long time no see, Shinobu greeted with a false smile, returning her wave. Naruto looked at her oddly. Who's the blonde cutie? Mitsuri asked Shinobu as she bounded over to them. Naruto regarded her dryly before turning to Shinobu. Are all of you Hashiras weird? He asked. Shinobu struggled to keep her smile in place, but she could already feel a migraine coming, knowing she'd now have to work to the second most annoying person she knew. Naruto occupied the number 1 spot in her long list thus far. I'll explain everything later, Shinobu said, speaking to Mitsuri. Her falsified expression still in place. I believe we've a job to do. Isn't the sunset absolutely beautiful? Naruto, Shinobu, and Mitsuri stood out on the pier, staring out to the gently rocking sea bathed in the light of the setting sun. After settling into their respective rooms, they agreed to meet at their current location to discuss their upcoming demon hunt. It had been the busty slayer who spoke, swinging her hips side to side as she leaned over the edge of the railing, enjoying the sight before her with a hum. Before meeting with the others, Naruto created a small group of clones, 3 to gather nature chakra, while the others scouted the surrounding village from the shadows. Was still very much anticipating the possibility he may need to face them, their odds against him doubling now that they were together. At a glance, there was no indication as to what the beautiful love Hashira was capable of. Her katana, for what little he could see, was rather vibrant in its color scheme. Sheathed in a brilliant white hilt, its blade obscured to him. She certainly lived up to the love title, as the guard consisted of pink hearts below a bright green handle with, keeping to her theme, tiny pink hearts along it. As for her behavior, well, she behaved like something of an airhead, blushing every time he caught her looking at him. Whatever her abilities, Naruto wondered what, if any, information Shinobu passed along regarding his allying with Tamayo, a demon. Or the fact they had only recently tried to kill one another. Even if she hadn't, it would soon become apparent something happened to Shinobu considering her sword was shattered. What's the contingency for taking out a demon? Do either of you have a plan? Naruto asked as he joined Mitsuri in leaning against the railing, watching the rippling weight closely for any signs of life. You'll be helping us then, Blondie-kun? Mitsuri asked with a cute tilt of her head. My name's Naruto, he groused. Yes, Whisker-kun tilde, Mitsuri said with a beaming smile. Naruto looked to Shinobu for an explanation for her eccentricities, but only received a cheery false smile in return. I'm guessing that's a no on the plan, he concluded with a sigh. The two women at his side, for as little as he'd known them, ranked amongst the oddest he'd ever met and continued to ascend that list. Don't worry, Shinobu-chan and I will take care of it. This is no place for someone as cute as you, Mitsuri said, her lime-colored eyes fluttering at him. Naruto looked away, releasing a long-winded sigh as he contemplated what he'd done to deserve what had befallen him as of late. Oh my, but I believe we may need Naruto-san's help here, Shinobu said, feigning a worried expression. He's surprisingly adept when it comes to combat. Also, as an unfortunate turn of events, my blade is broken. What? Mitsuri gasped in what was genuine surprise. Shinobu-chan, how did this happen? Did you encounter a powerful demon? Is that how you met Whisker-kun? She finished, looking to Naruto for his own explanation, but he gave none. Something like that, Shinobu said, leveling Naruto a glare Mitsuri couldn't see. All that matters is Naruto-san here will be fighting in my stead. You must be strong if Shinobu-chan's vouching for you, Mitsuri said, her eyes becoming slightly unfocused as she placed a hand on her katana. How strong? Whoa. Naruto subtly gestured a nearby clone to refrain from interfering with a subtle shake of his head, sensing it building chakra in preparation for an attack. He himself was anything to come, if only in mental preparation as he retained his composure, all the while wondering why she was blushing again. Now, Mitsuri-chan, this is not the time for that, Shinobu said, stepping in believing a fight between the two may just end up with them being wed. That was if Naruto didn't outright kill her. Kill them, considering who she would have to side with if they fought. But how else am I supposed to know if he's stronger than me? Mitsuri whined, stomping her foot with a petulant pout. Naruto didn't lower his guard, but did find himself outright confused. Why would you need to know if I'm stronger than you? He had to ask. Mitsuri blushed again, her entire demeanor changing as if on a switch, suddenly looking shyer than ever. Why you're so forward, Whisker-kun, she said, pressing her fingers together in a very familiar gesture. What? Naruto once more looked to Shinobu for an answer to the mystery that was the love Hashira. But of course he should have known better because all he received another false and yet somehow mocking smile. He quickly decided that unless he wanted his hair to match both of his senseis in color, it would be best not to worry him trying to solve that mystery. Whatever. Can we just talk strategy? Thankfully that spurred on the discussion of the demon they were hunting. Neither demon slayer was entirely sure of what they would be facing beyond speculation and seahand information. Stories, really. What little they did know was concerning. There was legend of a demon that lurked in the seas, traveling from coastal village to coastal village, attacking the local populace along with any ships unfortunate enough to its path. Over the years this had become something of an old sailor's tale told to dissuade those willing to sail into storms, or used to explain away bouts of bad luck. The demon had been around for years, somehow always escaping the demon slayer's blade. If it is this sea demon, then perhaps it would be advisable to call for more backup, Shinobu said. Without my blade, I'll be of little help beyond enhancing yours with my poison, Mitsuri. Also, we won't be able to fight it in the water, so we'd have to bring it onto land, putting the villagers at a great risk. Though I suppose we can try and evict the villagers. You're right on that end, Naruto agreed. And though I doubt we'd be able to convince them all to leave, I suppose it's worth it to try. Either way, to minimize potential collateral damage, we'll have to fight it in the water. That would mean fighting it in its natural element, Shinobu added. Oh my, but perhaps you're unaware of the disadvantages in doing so. Naruto didn't rise to her provocation that time because he anticipated the question. Shinobu-chan's right. What do you suggest we do, Whisker-kun? Mitsuri asked, looking to him with great interest. We find a middle ground, Naruto said, pointing towards the more desolate section of the beach. I'll draw it to the beach. Not quite onto land but close enough for you two. In for the kill. I can even create a temporary wall between the sea and village while we fight. Shinobu noted he seemed comfortable with tactics and giving orders, something even some of the Hashira struggled with from time to time, especially when in regards to working with one another and egos clashed. You can do that? Mitsuri asked in awe. Yes, but this all hinges on you, Naruto said, nodding to her. Shinobu and I don't have a sword but I should be able to weaken it enough for you to finish it off. Are you sure about this, Whisker-kun? Mitsuri asked, sounding as serious as she possibly could considering she continued to speak in her soft yet high-pitched voice. You're a capable cutie, but this demon is very much dangerous from what little we know of it. I'll be fine. Question is, will you be able to finish it off? Naruto rebutted calmly. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I can handle myself. If you can't do your part, you can just loan me your sword and I'll take care of this. Mitsuri protectively held her sword close to her hips with both hands, blushing deeply again. Use my sword. But Whisker-kun, we don't even know each other that least buy me dinner first. She finished with a girlish squeal, her hands having moved to hold herself, she began to writhe. This time even Shinobu had her difficulties maintaining her mocking smile considering Mitsuri was meant to be representing the Hashira and she'd done little to honor the tea. Behaving like a lustful, love-struck teen girl. Matters were only made worse when confronted with the fact it was true. Is that really a big deal? Naruto couldn't help but wonder. Shinobu let me use hers. Shinobu was now openly glaring at Naruto, her own blush dusting her cheeks. Shinobu-chan did what? Mitsuri looked between the two of them, her head snapping side to side so fast her own thick hair tails began to audibly slap her own face. Shin-chan, why didn't you tell me Whisker-kun was your... Oh my, finish that sentence and I'll have to tell everyone about why you really became a Hashira, Shinobu warned with a smile that was entirely absent of any warmth. I told you that in confidence. Mitsuri gasped, blushing even more. Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose in order to fight off a growing migraine completely stemming from their annoying him. Can we please just get back to what we were discussing? I agree, Shinobu said. Yes, Mitsuri pouted. Good, Naruto punctuated, feeling as though he were speaking with a couple of children. As to my original question. Mitsuri looked to Shinobu, asking a question Naruto wasn't privy to with her eyes alone and as if they hadn't just argued. While still maintaining her false smile, Shinobu nodded. Interesting. Mitsuri was blushing again. If you've managed to convince Shinobu-chan, then I suppose it's worth it to try. You have my word, Whisker-kun, I'll kill the dem. When it comes to it, I still maintain we await further support from other Hashira, Shinobu added. More Hashira meant more people to potentially contend with. He supposed it was something he would eventually have to face considering he was being taken to meet them. He wasn't entirely certain he was prepared for that yet. I understand where you're coming from, but what if it gets away again while we wait? Naruto proposed. Earlier you mentioned it disappears, sometimes for years at a time, making it hard to track. We might not be able to wait for more of you to arrive. If we let it get away now, who knows how many more'll die before it's found again. Whisker-kun has a point, Mitsuri added. It's Naruto. Mitsuri smiled at him and used both index fingers to trace 3 lines against each of her own cheeks, mimicking his birthmarks. Very well, Shinobu agreed after a moment's consideration. She hated to admit Naruto was right on any account, but she couldn't deny the logic in his reasoning. Alright then. This is what we'll do. Naruto began by unsealing his mask from the palm of his left hand. First, Shinobu, I need you to. Ah, I love your mask. Mitsuri trotted up to him too. Look at where he'd hung it off the side of his head, her face very close to his own. Are you a friend of Yorokotaki's? She asked, turning to meet his eyes. Ooh, is he who trained you? Yano, you kinda act like him too. All brooding and grumpy. No, Naruto said, pushing Mitsuri away by poking her forehead, feeling much more resistance than he was expecting. Now shut up and don't interrupt me again. Shinobu couldn't resist smiling, a genuine one this time, seeing Mitsuri crouched off to the side, drawing invisible circles on the pier. For a moment, she even allowed hers. Imagine a dark cloud looming over the boisterous Hashira's head, pouring. Not many people could engage her without becoming either a drooling mess, or impassive all toto her quirks. I'm sorry, Mitsuri muttered. As I was saying, Naruto continued, completely ignoring the beautiful woman's sorry state. Shinobu, I'll need you to poison my kunai and just to be sure, Mitsuri's sword. Well, also, I want you to stay back at a safe distance. Mitsuri, you wait for my mark. Once I weaken it, that's when you'll come in and finish it off. Sounds simplistic, Shinobu commented. There's really not much more to it than that, Naruto offered with a shrug of his shoulders. Now, let's get started. Shinobu was startled seeing Naruto shrug off his robes, revealing he wore nothing beneath except for a simple pair of boxer shorts. That in itself was unexpected, but no m. Then what he did next? Naruto bit into his own thumb, streaking it across his exposed chest, resulting in a cloud of smoke obscuring him briefly. When it cleared, he was holding the armor from Th. Before, a dark thin undershirt, a chainmail shirt with patches of rust, and a green vest. He dropped all but the dark undershirt, the heavy thud and following reverberation on the pier alluded to just how heavy his armor was. But neither women put much thought into that, at least not for long as their focus strayed to something else. Oh. Mitsuri's eyes became half-lidded. Shinobu's eyes roamed his broad back, having since turned away from them. Scars, both old and recent, painted a gruesome picture of a life of combat. Taut, powerful M stretched and undulated as he slipped on the undershirt, followed by the heavy chainmail, and finally the vest. It was only when he bent over to put on his pants that Shinobu realized she was staring a little too closely. With a faint heat to her cheeks, she turned away, chastising her finding any part of the annoying blonde attractive. Naruto finished zipping up his armor, patting it down in a few sections, noting it was getting worn and he would either need to repair it or find something new. He pulled A from within and presented it to Shinobu, who was making an odd face. Her and Mitsuri both, but he paid no mind to this. Spit on it. Excuse me. Shinobu's face grew darker in color. Mitsuri's as well. Naruto's eyebrow rose in brief confusion before rolling his eyes in realization. Get your mind out of the gutter. I need you to coat it with that demon poison of yours. Oh my, do you truly believe I create my poison within my body? Shinobu asked, her faux pleasantness slipping momentarily. Well yeah, Naruto admitted with a shrug. Yano. Like a snake. Mitsuri had to slap a hand over her mouth to keep herself from laughing. Shinobu, never once breaking eye contact with him, reached into her robes to produce a small vial. She tossed it to him with slightly more force than necessary, but he cowed. Nonetheless. It's an honest mistake, Mitsuri chimed in sheepishly. I kinda assumed the same thing. Shinobu turned her smile to Mitsuri, who seemed to see through it, shrinking further into herself. What? We don't talk as much as I'd like. Alright then. You two wait here while I go get set up, Naruto said, moving their preparations along. Shinobu watched him go, admittedly curious to see further what he could do. So, Mitsuri elongated the word. Where'd you meet Whisker-kun? That's a long story, I'm afraid. I think it's best we focus on the task at hand, don't you? Shinobu proposed, tilting her head with a smile. You're no fun, Shinobu-chan, Mitsuri whined. But Shinobu paid her little mind, instead focusing on Naruto as he walked just beyond the edge of the beach. Two identical copies of himself exploded into existence at high, pulling a gasp from her fellow demon slayer. Oh my, three whisker kuns. Mitsuri muttered breathlessly, her face warming again. Shinobu's attention sharpened, hoping for any insight on just how he was able to perform demon-like arts. He gave no visible indication as to how he produced his copies. Then the odd way in which he moved his hands, his fingers forming meaningful configurations so fast she almost couldn't see them. Similarly, his copies mimicked his actio. Both women couldn't help but to share a look of surprise when all three Narutos slammed their hands on the ground and the earth began to tremble. Incredibly, a massive of dirt began to rise from beneath, reaching at least 40 feet in height, spanning the entirety of the beach in mere moments. The three copies converged with who Shinobu assumed to be the original Naruto, a theory backed by the fact he began to give out orders. You maintain the wall, Naruto directed the first. And you go in the water to look for it. Dispel whenever you see it. His words were soft-spoken but Shinobu heard him clearly. One of the copies, to their continued surprise, calmly walked up the wall they'd just erected, defying gravity as if it were perfectly normal. The other one, meanwhile, walked towards the ocean, trudging through the water just as calmly, the water rising past his knees, up to his chest until his head fully disappeared beneath the surface of the tumultuous water. Meanwhile, the remaining Naruto sat himself on the edge of the water, beginning to what Shinobu assumed was to meditate. He became deathly still, so still he didn't even to breath. He certainly was, but his breaths were shallow and far and few between. I know I already asked, but who is he? Mitsuri asked, sounding truly curious, but there was something underlining her words. What was he? Shinobu was well aware of the true question being asked of her, but she didn't exactly have an easy answer because even she didn't know. Naruto was a mystery she need observe further. We must keep a close eye on him. Mitsuri, Shinobu revealed in a whisper, never once looking away from the sight before them. I'm taking him to meet Ubuyashiki-sama. Because I truly believe he has the potential to be a Hashira himself. That being said, I do not know to what extent we can trust him yet. Is he dangerous? Mitsuri asked, her ditzy demeanor suddenly absent. I cannot confidently speak for his intentions, but he is undoubtedly powerful. Be that on our level or beyond, I honestly would rather not have to find out. All I know is that cannot afford to underestimate him, Shinobu advised, her grip on the wood railing rightening to the point of splintering it. Or to go against him. The strength of a Hashira or beyond, Mitsuri sounded ponderous. Shinobu realized that, to her immense disappointment, was blushing again as she studied Naruto closely. A couple of hours passed before anything happened. In that time Shinobu had no choice but to reluctantly relay what had transpired between them, leaving out any mentio. The two demons they'd gone to war over. In her recounting their fight was born of a misunderstanding. This only had the unintended effect of reinforcing Mitsuri's interest in the blonde. Not that Shinobu placed too much importance on this. The love Hashira's crushes typically depended on the day of the week and were often fleeting once they all failed to meet whatever prerequisites she had. Speaking of Naruto, in that 2 hours he'd yet to move from where he'd taken his seat, and his copy, the one that had disappeared into the sea, never resurfaced. Shinobu was growing rather annoyed with Mitsuri's attempts to pass the time by asking questions about the aforementioned blonde, questions she couldn't possibly know, having just it's here. His shout was abrupt, calling their attention to the ocean just in time to see it illuminate briefly before something exploded deep in the dark depths, the surface-level belch a cloud of smoke. That's when something began to emerge. The demon's head surfaced first, the overall shape a horrifying amalgamation of a shark and a squid. Its skin was covered in scales, a light-consuming shade of dark. Two menacing horizontally slitted golden eyes broke the surface, glaring at Naruto specifically. Next to emerge were the bone protrusions surrounded what would have been its and along the side of its head, concentrated around its gills. It continued to rise from the depths, eclipsing the moon's very light in its sheer size, revealing an almost humanoid body. Its exposed arms were equally massive and ripple tightly wound muscle, webbed hands ending with bone-like protrusions as opposed to claws. It was a monster in every sense of the word, towering high above them, almost as, if not taller than a fully formed biju. Its maw open to reveal thousands of jagged teeth and a writhing mass of tentacles within. Twin jets of superheated steam spewed from its nostrils, its gills opening to air violently before releasing a roar. The shock wave the roar produced was visible before it was audible, exploding in a sound that was somehow both deep and high-pitched. Naruto continued to look up at the towering demon much larger than he'd expected and released a tired sigh at what was to come. Fuck. It began advancing forward, its massive stature giving the illusion of being slow-moving, but the violence in how the water warped and parted around it spoke to its speed. The sea could not dampen the shaking of the earth. It's so big, Mitsuri exclaimed, drawing her sword. She dashed forward, leaping from the pier, crossing a long distance to join Naruto's side. Are you sure you wanna do tea? Whisker-kun. Yeah, that thing's fucking big, but the plan's the same. I'll weaken it so that you can finish it, Naruto said as he began to walk towards the water. Maybe you shouldn't go swimming with that thing, Whisker-kun, Mitsuri advised. It's Naruto, and I'm not, Naruto said, walking on the water's surface with his right hand held outstretched. You can walk on water too, Mitsuri called out from behind him. So neat. It's much larger than the reports suggested. Naruto, we must retreat at once. Shinobu called to him. Naruto could sense the immense danger they currently faced by how the demon's intent to kill permeated his own anger and determination. His clone hadn't even been detect the massive demon in the water until it was in its grasp, ending itself by exploding. The demon before him was very much a threat, and though a retreat would have been the most logical course of action, doing so may lead it to the nearby village. He could allow for that to happen. There was no turning back. In his right hand a Rasengan came to be, along with another clone, who began to infuse wind chakra into the technique. He instructed his clone to call for and take place of his sage clones, as he would need additional support in assuring the demon didn't reach the village. Naruto, are you listening to me? Shinobu called to him again. She and Mitsuri both were, in their own ways, troubled by what they were seeing. The demon before them was larger than any they'd ever personally witnessed, and they were suddenly inundated with a sense of danger that it exuded. Yet Naruto stood firm in his advance, now wielding a large swirling ball of brilliant energy, tearing through the sounds of impending doom with a high-pitched whistle. Another roar, rattling everything like rolling thunder, and as it approached, the more of its true stature was revealed. Shinobu-chan, you should call Naruto back now. Mitsuri steadied her sword, taking a stance. Any traces of humor were completely absent from her face. Shinobu, having joined Mitsuri on the beach, glared at her fellow Hashira. What do you think I'm attempting to do? The water exploded beneath Naruto's feet, and suddenly he was hundreds of feet in the air, near level with the demon. To both their shock, he threw the technique at the D. The technique shot forward with an incredible speed, impacting the demon in its upper torso, near its head. The violent clash created more exploding shockwaves as it expressed the swirling eddy surrounding the bar, spinning faster before exploding in a blinding light. When their vision returned to them, the demon stood in place, half of its head missing, along with sections of its torso. It was as if everything the light touched was destro, leaving a circular crater. Slowly, the demon fell back, creating large waves in its wake. More of Naruto's clones appeared surrounding the nearby land, erecting more walls to protect the land from miniature tsunami the demon's falling created. He did it. Mitsuri was absolutely stunned, her sword falling limp at her side, digging into the sand with a near inaudible crunch. Beside her, Shinobu was in a similar state, only now beginning to understand just how powerful Naruto may truly be. To have been able to take a demon of such apparent and scale down with a single technique was a sight to behold. Mitsuri. Naruto barked as he fell back onto the water, landing in a graceful crouch on the surface. You need to be ready before it fully reforms next time. This thing's more dangerous than I thought. We need to kill it as soon as possible. She'd missed her chance, both demon slayers realized. So caught up in the amazing display, Mitsuri failed to perform, and the frown on her face alluded to this realization. Right. Mitsuri recomposed herself, nearing the water's edge. Shinobu, you get out of here. Go with my clones and begin evacuating the village. Naruto ordered. I'm sure they've heard and probably seen why they should listen to why. Now, Shinobu nodded and followed his command without question, knowing it was the best course of action for her considering there was little she could do to help them with her own sword. The water exploded. Again, revealing the demon had already reformed again, and in so little time, releasing another explosive roar. A multitude of tentacles appeared from back, all shooting towards Naruto. Naruto flickered out of its path of attacks, using his nature-enhanced senses to detect the tentacles trying to flank him from beneath the water's surface. He was forced to toin the air again, a kunai in hand. He threw it at the demon's right leg, replacing himself with it before he was skewered by the lightning-fast tentacles in an environment he couldn't move any further. The momentum and the abrupt nature of his replacement didn't allow for the demon to react before Naruto planted a large Rasengan into the joint between its lower and leg, using his enhanced strength to shatter the cartilage within. The demon bellowed in pain, falling to one knee. Naruto maneuvered behind the demon, 5 more clones exploding into existence beside him. They all proceeded to rain kunai into the demon's back, targeting joints and perceived weak points. The scales were incredibly resilient, shattering most of his kunai upon impact, meanwhile others were deflected by its tentacles. Using a multiplying technique, a few made it through the exposed sections of underskin, the poison coating them, aiding in burrowing the blades deeper. Use a wind technique to knock it down. Naruto ordered his clones as he retreated a safe distance, feeling his initial round of nature chakra leave his body. He dispelled on his distant sage clones, bringing himself back into his enhancement. His clones worked in near perfect unison, having run through their had signs, their palms shot forward and another explosion sounded as a visible wall of wind crashed Aga. The demon and its oncoming tentacles, knocking the towering beast forward. The demon's massive head slammed onto the beach, kicking up a wall of sand that was quickly dispelled by a land station clone's own wind technique, clearing the visib. Mitsuri. Mitsuri stood her ground, waiting for her opportunity to strike, trying her best not to allow herself to lose focus at the amazing display she was witnessing. Having worked few of her fellow Hashira, though on a rare occasion, she was well aware of their capabilities. Not all of them, of course, but she'd witnessed plenty of awe-inspiring battles, her heart racing. They were strong, certainly, but not enough to be considered husband material. If it came down to it, not that it ever would, Mitsuri was certain she was stronger than most them. However, there was something about seeing Naruto, a total stranger, one not at all affiliated with the Demon Slayer Corp, battle the demon that certainly piqued her interest. It didn't hurt that she found him handsome. But the battle had just begun, and though he'd certainly damaged the demon, it meant very little until he could present her an opportunity to sever the head. Naruto began moving his hands in the odd manner she observed twice now, following whatever art his copies performed to conjure a wall of wind to knock the demon over. Though not quite a dance, he displayed the signifiers of a wind breath user. That preconceived notion was shattered as he steadied his stance, gripping his right hand with his left. The sounds of what almost resembled multiple birds chirping erupt, following a strobing blue light. A ball of electricity sparked to life in his hand, its wild arcs stabbing at cresting waves and any other paths of least resistance. The other copies seemed to realize this as well and soon mimicked the art, though none of their electricity seemed to be as vibrant or as powerful. Now, they all moved at his command, sending more shockwaves as they disappeared in a movement Mitsuri almost couldn't follow. That's when his previous actions made sense. Mitsuri wondered why he even bothered trying to skewer the demon with such small blades, even if coated with Shinobu's Po. To a demon of such stature and power, they would prove to be little more than an inconvenience. Their attack converged and expanded in a bright flash. The electricity bounded from one blade to another, creating an odd shape of constant flow, severely electrifying the enough to render it stiff, unable to move beyond releasing a bellowing screech. Now, Mitsuri, Naruto shouted, his voice sounding extremely strained. I'll let off as soon as you're in range. The copies surrounding him exploded out of existence nearly all at once. That's how Mitsuri realized the art was not prejudice in who it targeted in the water. Arcs of Elector continuously slammed into Naruto's armor, bounding between the buttons on his chest, smoke beginning to rise from it. She could not afford to miss her mark again. Third form. Cat Love Shower. Mitsuri moved, her blade elongated to sever the massive demon's head. Naruto was going through a vast amount of his nature chakra to protect himself from being electrocuted by his own technique, his concentration split in many directions. Primary focus on Mitsuri. She moved fast, leaping into a rolling spin, building speed. Her blade grew longer with each resolution, poised to decapitate the demon. It was his instincts that alerted him of the incoming danger. He moved before he even realized why, rushing towards Mitsuri. With a kunai enhanced with wind chakra, he see through the melted zipper of his flak jacket, now smoldering. It all happened in a blink of the eye. Naruto stunted all her momentum at once, using his own kunai to stop her roll, breaking it in the process. He wrapped himself around. Time to protect her from a multitude of sharp bone spears the demon expelled from around its neck. His clones moved in quickly, his sage clone taking the lead in creating another Rasenshuriken, while the others unleashed a multitude of their own techniques to pull the attention from them. Naruto. His chainmail carried out its intended purpose, but it only covered his chest. Upon setting Mitsuri down, Naruto had to pull 3 spears that had managed to stick him. 2. His right thigh and leg, and one that pierced his left arm. Fuck. Naruto groused, feeling one of his lungs collapsing from the sheer impact of the bone spear impacting his armor. He even had to pull the chainmail away from his where it had become slightly embedded into his skin from the impact. Naruto. The voice repeated. Naruto, you're hurt. It wasn't Mitsuri. I thought I told you to go. Naruto muttered, spitting up a wad of bitter blood. Shinobu looked torn between angry and concerned. We must retreat like I suggested. The village has been evacuated except for a few stubborn residents. Without my sword, this is currently beyond our capabilities. Shino argued. No, it's fine, Naruto said, grimacing as he thumbed some of the blood from his chin, tracing it across his right palm. He grasped the needle now in his hand, removing with a flick of his thumb. What is that? Shinobu asked. A gift from our friend, Naruto muttered before stabbing it into his left pectoral, Tamayo's healing concoction immediately beginning to work in combination with his own healing, along with the dispelling of his third and final clone imbuing him with nature chakra. He closed his eyes, concentrating his chakra and flared it, allowing it to course throughout his entire body at an advanced rate. But you're in no condition to fight anymore, Shinobu argued through grit teeth. That's when she realized there was steam rising from Naruto's wounds, and to her disbelief began to mend shut before her very own eyes. Shinobu took an involuntary step back as Naruto almost seemed to glow, his already wild hair swayed as if blown by an upward gust of wind. Beyond what he outwardly displayed, there was a substantial change in what she sensed from him. It was as if he was radiating a heat that had no actual effect on the temperature, his very presence surrounding her. There was something almost calming about the feeling and almost dread-inducing when it was gone. Something Shinobu would consider when their lives weren't in immediate danger. This is just an inconvenience, Naruto said, feeling the pain throughout his body lessen, another side effect of Tamayo's impressive creation and his own chakra surge. Demon may be powerful, but it's slow. Well, except for those damn spikes. If not for a demon's bullshit healing abilities, I would've killed it by now. That much was true, but it didn't count for much when the outcome remained the same. The demon still lived. But what if you cannot position it within Mitsuri's range? Shinobu pressed harshly. Naruto, I know you believe you are strong, and perhaps you are, but what if you're not strong enough to properly defeat this demon? What happens if you die here because you refuse to accept retreat? Naruto offered her a stiff shrug, his attention on the clones battling it out with the massive demon. They were inflicting, clearly dealing damage to it, but it continued to her rate that far surpassed the first demon he encountered. It really was frustrating having the sufficient strength to kill the demon, while being unable to defeat it due to its incredibly pesky healing. If I die, you won't have to deal with me anymore, Naruto replied absent-mindedly as glanced at the love Hashira. The way in which he presented his own death was as casual as could be, and it bothered Shinobu for reasons beyond herself. All she knew was that it did. Mitsuri, Naruto called to the oddly silent woman. Yes. Mitsuri acknowledged in a monotone. You're a Hashira, right? That means you're supposed to be powerful. The best the demon slayers have to offer, he pressed. Yes. Mitsuri nodded, her frown tightening. The act like one. Naruto spoke harshly but did not raise his voice. I'm gonna bring it down again, but this time, I need you to follow through and kill it. I don't think I have. Warn you to watch for its defenses. I could have dodged that, Mitsuri muttered after having flinched at his words. Not with you soaring through the air like that, Naruto countered. That much was true, Mitsuri lamented. I would have survived, Mitsuri muttered in just above a whisper. Probably. Naruto relented with an acknowledging nod, feeling the beginnings of guilt at her downtrodden expression. He suddenly felt as though he'd just yelled at a pup. Explosion briefly pulled his attention back to the fight. His sage clone had performed a combination technique with a clone, combining wind and fire to ignite the night sky. Feel like we've been going about this all wrong, and that's my fault. I think I need to trust in your abilities as a, are you okay? When he turned back to face her, he was confused to discover that while her serious expression returned, somehow Mitsuri's blush was more pronounced than ever. Yes, Mitsuri nodded herself, both her solemn expression and blush both remaining. Naruto slowly returned the nod. Right, well, I know we probably should have gone over this earlier, but I made the mistake of thinking this demon would be like the last on. Faced. I'm fast, I have enhanced strength, and I can perform techniques with most elements. Center yourself around that information. What was that first attack of yours? Mitsuri asked after having acknowledged his words with another nod. It was so pretty. Well, that's because it is one of my strongest techniques. I call it the Rasenshuriken because I couldn't think of anything better. The thing is, I can usually kill things with th technique in one go. So you can imagine I'm a little annoyed by the demon's stupid healing, Naruto muttered with arms crossed. You'll soon learn that's a common problem most of our inexperienced slayers face, Shinobu added. Which is why we should finish this, Naruto said, regarding Mitsuri alone. So I can get one of those fancy katanas myself. I'm fast and strong as well, Mitsuri understood what he was asking of her. And I can control the length of my blade. My specialty is love breathing. Then show me what that means, and what you can do, love Hashira, Naruto challenged. Mitsuri finally cracked a smile, a smirk really. You're on, Mask-kun. She shot forward in an incredible display of speed, running across the surface of the water to join in on the fray. Well shit, she can do that too. That would have been nice to know, Naruto muttered to himself. He looked to Shinobu once more. You really should get out of here, but you do, I have a favor to ask. Shinobu didn't answer him, but her maintained eye contact was enough to tell him she was listening. Well, two actually. I know you really don't owe me anything, but if I fuck this up and somehow end up dying here, I want you to leave Tamayo and Yushiro alone. I know why. Probably have your reasons for hating demons in the way you do, and I really am sorry if I made it seem like I didn't care, but I really do think they're good people, dem. Whatever you wanna call them. Naruto briefly paused to allow his words to settle before he made his request. You don't have to work with them, or even help them in an. But please don't try and kill her. I suppose you'll have to continue pleading your case, Shinobu said after a moment's pause and sincere consideration. And as for your second request, the village we just came from, I promised a few kids I'd check on them from time to time. I really just need you to make sure that shitty village leaders taking care of th proper, Naruto said. Shinobu's expression and posture slowly relaxed as she slipped her mask of sickly sweet pleasantries back into place. She reached into her robes to produce another vial, one red in color. She tossed it at him, underhanded this time, sending it soaring gently into his open hand. What is this? Naruto asked reluctantly. My own healing medicine, Shinobu said, turning away. It may not be as potent as hers, but you might find it'll help you should you need it. I already have my own little butterflies to care for, so I suppose you can't die if you're to take care of those children and your pet demons. Naruto managed a small smile at her retreating back, finding maybe she did have a heart after all. It's not poison, is it? But he really couldn't help himself. Shinobu seemed to stumble slightly in her stride, turning to glare at him briefly. No, it is not. She disappeared in a sprint. Naruto hummed, wondering where that had come from. But he didn't give the matter much importance as he readied himself to join the ongoing battle. Mitsuri was certainly. He suspected it was how she managed to run atop the water alongside his clones, her movements fluid yet powerful, cutting deep into the demon. Seeing just how adept she seemed to be, Naruto decided he didn't need to worry about her as much as he had been. He tore the remainder of his chainmail off and tossed the side, unsealing a fresh kunai. Coating his blade into Shinobu's poison, he joined Mitsuri in battle.